When you look at a majestic tree or, a vibrant garden, what's the first thing you notice? The leaves? Maybe the bright flowers? The
Yeah.
fruit?
Yeah, the stuff above ground.
Exactly. But what if we told you the real magic, the true architects of a plant's success, are almost entirely out of sight, working away in the dark?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into, well, the hidden half of the plant kingdom. We're going deep underground to explore the secret lives of plant roots.
And these aren't just simple anchors holding the plant up, are they?
Not at all. Forget what you thought you knew. They are nature's most unsung, incredibly resilient, and frankly, utterly fascinating engineer.
Right. We've dug into a stack of fascinating sources for this detailed scientific papers, in-depth studies, basically trying to unpack the incredible complex functions of these root systems.
And our mission today is really to give you a shortcut to being well-informed about this whole subterranean world that, let's face it, sustains pretty much all life.
You're about to discover why understanding roots isn't just for, botanists or farmers.
No, it's for anyone curious about the foundations of nature. And maybe, just maybe, how to avoid some common mistakes if you've ever struggled to keep a houseplant alive.
Guilty as charged on that one.
Yeah.
So we'll explore their essential jobs, the constant battles they face, and how they interact with their environment, even with each other.
Okay, so where do we start? To really get it, you have to go right back to the beginning, the seed.
The very start of life for the plant.
What's fascinating is just how fundamental roots are from moment one. The root is literally the first organ to pop out of a germinating seed.
The very first thing.
Yeah, it's actually packed inside the seed, already in an emerging position, almost like it's poised, ready for this critical mission.
Wow, so it's not just passively pushed out, it's like actively growing from the get-go.
Yeah.
So what happens if that growth, that continuous elongation, gets stopped or slowed down?
Well, any reduction in that root elongation rate, it negatively affects the entire plant. Everything you see above ground suffers.
Which raises the question.
Yeah.
How do they even know where to go? They can't just be blindly pushing through the soil, can they?
That's a great question. No, they're not blind at all. This next part is genuinely mind-bending. Roots are incredibly perceptive.
Perceptive how? Like they can feel things.
Totally. They respond to touch, that's called thigmotropism, and they respond to gravity, which is gravitropism. They're constantly taking in this information, integrating it to grow in the right direction.
Okay, touch and gravity, that makes sense.
But there's more. There's something called oxytropism.
Oxytropism. Oxygen. What does that mean for a root?
It's really cool. It's the ability of roots to actively avoid soil that doesn't have enough oxygen.
Avoid it. Why?
Well, it helps them find better conditions, obviously, but it also acts as this clever physiological mechanism to reduce competition with other roots. For water, nutrients, and yeah, for oxygen itself. It's a built-in survival strategy.
Okay, so they're sensing gravity, touch, oxygen levels. That's a lot happening down there. But it sounds like it's not always an easy ride. They must face constant challenges, right? Like physical roadblocks.
Oh, absolutely. It's a battle down there. One of the biggest physical problems is soil compaction.
How does that happen? Just heavy machinery or?
It can be physical impact, yeah, like tractors, but also careless handling of potted plants or even over-irrigation, especially in sandy soils.
And sand, once it's compacted, our sources say it's essentially irreversible. That sounds pretty final.
It's tough. You can picture it, right? A cotton root hitting compacted subsoil. It often just gets deflected, grows sideways, searching for a crack or a softer path to go down. It shows their persistence, though.
Definitely. So compaction is one hurdle. What else?
Well, beyond compaction, roots need that balance of sufficient water and proper aeration. Too much water, especially when it's hot, can actually lead to oxygen deficiency.
And that kills roots.
It can, yes. Root death. And of course, extreme soil temperatures, way too hot or way too cold, can be absolutely devastating.
Okay, physical barriers, temperature, water issues.
Yeah.
But what about the soil chemistry? Are they navigating, like, chemical minefields down there too?
In many cases, yes. They have to deal with saline soils or sodic soils, basically too much salt or sodium.
Which makes it hard to get water, right?
Right.
Osmosis and all that.
Exactly. Then there's low pH soil, acidic soil, which can unlock toxic levels of things like aluminum. Plus, dealing with either shortages or excesses of the main nutrients and sometimes heavy metals. These chemical imbalances can severely restrict growth.
This makes me think about container plants,
Yep.
the ones we have at home. They must face a unique set of challenges.
They really do. Unlike a plant out in a field where deep roots might sense changes slowly, In a pot, the entire root system is exposed to every single environmental swing all at
So
once.
there's nowhere to hide.
Pretty much. It leaves no room to escape human-imposed mistakes, as one source puts it.
Like what kind of mistakes? Overwatering.
That's a big one, yeah. Oxygen deficiency from overwatering. Also, salt building up if you don't water enough to flush it through. Ammonium toxicity if you use high fertilizer concentrations when it's hot. Or just the pot itself getting too hot in direct sun.
Right, the container material must matter too.
Hugely. Think about bonsai. That's the extreme example of limiting root growth by confinement. But even regular pots. Clay pots can actually keep roots cooler through evaporation. But plastic or metal pots, they can heat up way above the air temperature, and that has devastating implications on hot days.
Devastating. How quickly can things go wrong?
It's surprisingly fast. Our sources point out that even a 10-minute oxygen shortage can stop root growth. Just 10 minutes
Wow.
and 30 minutes, that can kill the crucial elongation zone, the part right above the root tip that does the growing.
30 minutes. That really makes you rethink how you water your plants, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It highlights how sensitive that hidden half really is.
So, okay, given this constant underground battle, what's the absolute #1 priority for a root? What's the first thing it's always trying to find?
Water. Without a doubt, water. Right after germination, the main goal of that initial root elongation is to penetrate the soil quickly and secure a water supply.
And they have a name for that: directed growth.
Yep, hydrotropism. Literally growing towards water.
And it happens fast, you said.
Incredibly fast sometimes. Take watermelon seedlings. Their roots can be 20 centimeters long just 6 days after germination, even as the first leaves are just opening up, all powered by energy stored in the seed.
That's amazing. A 20-centimeter root in 6 days. Is there much difference between plants and how deep they go?
Yeah, quite a bit. Monocots, like corn, tend to have shallower systems, but dicots, like carrots or cabbage, they can go much deeper, sometimes up to 2.5 meters.
2.5 meters. And that depth matters, right, for
Well,
farming?
Oh, absolutely. Deeper roots mean the plant is better able to withstand drought, obviously, but also frost, and they can reach nutrients that might have washed down deeper into the soil.
So going back to that cotton example,
Yeah.
if compaction reduces yield, but irrigating the topsoil saves it,
Right. It suggests that while irrigation helps in the short term, those deep roots are still vital for resilience under natural conditions without constant human help.
makes sense. How do they manage to push through soil so effectively, especially compacted soil?
Well, they have a special structure at the very tip called the root cap.
A cap, like a little helmet.
Sort of. It
How?
protects the growing point, but it also does something else really clever. It secretes this slimy substance called mucilage, and it constantly sheds its outer cells.
Like lubricating the path.
Exactly. It's like a self-lubricating drill bit. There was this experiment with maize where removing the root cap halved the root's elongation rate in compacted soil.
Halved it.
Yeah. Demonstrating its lubricating effect was responsible for about 30% of its ability to penetrate. And here's another cool adaptation. When elongation is restricted, the root actually starts growing wider, radially, by about 30%.
So it bulks up to push harder.
Seems like it. It's adapting, trying to overcome the resistance. It just shows how incredibly responsive they are.
Okay, so they find the water, they push towards it. How do they actually take the water in? It's not just soaking in like a sponge, is it?
No, it's more sophisticated. Water transport across the root cell membranes is mainly handled by specialized proteins called aquaporins. Think of them as regulated water channels.
Aquaporins. Okay.
They allow a large amount of water to move through quite efficiently. But here's where it gets tricky.
Oh.
In drying soil, the roots themselves can actually shrink slightly.
Shrink.
Yeah, and lose full contact with the soil particles around them, and that can reduce water inflow by as much as a factor of 3.
Wow, so the connection gets broken.
Temporarily, yes. You can see this in experiments like one with chickpea sap flow. When they reduced irrigation to 70%, the sap flow dropped off significantly in the middle of the day.
Why then?
That's likely due to this root shrinkage and the water films around the roots getting disrupted. And the plant responds by closing its stomata, the pores on its leaves, to conserve water.
But if they irrigate fully,
At 100% irrigation, the flow stays high, the stomata stay open, the plant is happy.
do the roots recover from shrinking?
Yes, they tend to swell back up overnight when the water demand is lower, which means the morning hours are actually the most critical time for the plant to replenish its water supply.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned oxygen shortage earlier.
Yeah.
How quickly does that impact things?
Immediately. Oxygen shortage can stop root growth almost instantly.
Instantly.
Yeah, and this is really critical. What might seem like excess irrigation out in a field can actually cause these short-term oxygen deficits. And that leads to extended root damage, which is seldom noticed by farmers.
So even trying to help by watering might inadvertently cause hidden damage.
Exactly. It really highlights how easy it is to disrupt that delicate balance underground without even realizing it.
Okay, let's shift from water to food. Nutrients. The soil's full of different stuff. How do roots decide what to take up? They can't just absorb everything, surely.
Absolutely not. Their cell membranes show distinctive selectivity. They're like highly specific gatekeepers.
Selectivity. Give me an example.
Okay, potassium versus sodium. Potassium, K plus A, is essential. Sodium, Na plus A, can be harmful in excess. Roots actively select and pull in potassium while actively preventing sodium from entering or even pumping it back out if it gets in.
Even if there's way more sodium around.
Yep, even if sodium is much more abundant in the soil solution, scientists have even identified a specific gene in rice that controls this sodium secretion.
So it's a really active, deliberate filtering process. How does that work? Is it shape or?
It's believed to be related to things like the size of the ion when it's hydrated, surrounded by water molecules, and the specific size and charge of the protein channels in the membrane. It's this microscopic gatekeeping that explains why some plants, like mangroves, can live in salt water.
Right. While my tomatoes wilt if the soil gets even a little salty.
Exactly. It's all down to that root level control.
Okay, what about other nutrients? Like phosphorus.
Phosphorus, or P. That presents a different kind of puzzle. It doesn't move easily in the soil. It has a very short diffusion pathway.
So roots have to go find it.
Pretty much. When a plant is deficient in P, its roots tend to elongate more, exploring more soil. And when a root does encounter a pocket rich in phosphorus,
It stops and focuses there.
exactly. It proliferates locally, meaning it grows a dense network of fine roots right there to maximize uptake from that source.
Smart. And where does most P uptake happen? Main roots.
Well, studies in corn suggest most of it is actually due to the lateral roots, the finer side branches. And a lot of the phosphorus the plant needs for its whole life is acquired quite early in development.
But it's not just about finding it in the soil, right? The plant itself plays a role.
Yes, definitely. Internal plant metabolism, what's going on inside the plant, also regulates how much phosphorus the roots take up. It's not just about external availability.
Okay, but here's the part that really blew my mind from the sources. Roots don't just take nutrients.
No, this is the really cool part, the aha moment. Like you say, roots are active soil engineers. They're not just passive consumers.
They change the soil.
They actively excrete substances. Protons, which are basically acid, and organic anions like citric acid. People knew about citric acid release way back in 1894.
And what does releasing acid do?
It can actually dissolve minerals in the soil that aren't normally water-soluble, like rock phosphate. This makes the phosphorus locked up in those minerals available for the plant to absorb.
So they're literally dissolving rocks to get food.
In a microscopic way, yes. And it doesn't just benefit that plant. It can make nutrients available for the next crop grown in that soil, too. They're essentially farming their own food supply underground.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Truly active. But can they get too much phosphorus? Is P toxicity a thing?
It absolutely is. Some plant species are incredibly sensitive. There's an example, Verticordia plumosa, that shows toxicity symptoms at phosphorus concentrations that other plants would find really low.
And the symptoms look like what they see in genetically modified tomatoes that are also sensitive.
Exactly. The suggested mechanism involves messing up the plant's sugar metabolism, specifically an enzyme called hexokinase. It throws the whole energy system off balance.
And this matters because?
Well, it has global implications. As we apply more phosphorus fertilizers in agriculture, it can build up in soils, and this is linked to the disappearance of certain endangered wild plant species that just can't handle those levels.
Wow. Okay, so nutrient balance is key. What about nitrogen? That's another big one.
Nitrogen's got its own complexities. Plants can take it up in different forms: nitrate, ammonium, sometimes urea.
Does the form matter?
Yes. Nitrate is usually the main source in well-aerated soils. Ammonium, well, it can actually be beneficial at very low concentrations, but it quickly becomes detrimental, even toxic, at higher levels.
Especially for some plants.
Yeah, sensitive ones like tomato and cucumber really don't like much ammonium. Interestingly, when roots take up ammonium, they tend to release protons acid, which, as we just discussed, can help solubilize phosphorus.
So taking up one nutrient affects the availability of another. It's all connected.
Deeply connected. And the form of nitrogen the roots absorb, actually changes the pH right around the root surface, the rhizosphere.
And that pH change then affects other nutrients.
Exactly. Things like phosphorus again, but also iron, molybdenum, zinc. Their availability is very pH dependent. And get this, even if you grow chickpea and corn in the exact same nitrate solution, the chickpea root acidifies its surroundings, while the corn root makes its surroundings more alkaline.
Wow. So different plants actively create different chemical environments right around themselves.
Precisely. And speaking of chemical forms, urea, which is super common in fertilizers, it needs to be handled carefully. It breaks down in the soil, first into ammonium and then potentially into nitrite.
Nitrite is that bad?
It can be very toxic if it builds up in high concentrations near the roots. It can cause total plant death, and it can take a while, maybe 4 or 5 wints, for that nitrite to fully convert into the safer nitrate form.
Good to know. So we've covered sensing, finding water, getting nutrients, even changing the soil. But there are bigger forces orchestrating all this, right? Temperature, hormones, microbes.
Absolutely. Temperature, specifically root zone temperature, has a massive influence.
How so?
Well, at low root temperatures, say between 3 and 11 degrees Celsius, some plants actually shift their preference towards taking up ammonium instead of nitrate.
Why would they do that?
It seems to be because assimilating ammonium inside the plant takes less energy than assimilating nitrate, which is an advantage when it's cold and metabolic rates are low.
Okay, but there's a downside.
For sensitive plants, yes. Things like cucumber and melon, if their roots are still cold at dawn when the sun comes up and the leaves start demanding water, they can suffer morning desiccation.
Morning desiccation sounds bad.
It is. It can lead to the total loss of plants. The cold roots just can't supply water fast enough to the warming leaves. It's a dramatic effect from just having cold roots.
Wow. And what about high temperatures?
High root temperatures, especially getting up above 32 Celsius, severely reduce the plant's tolerance to ammonium.
Why is that?
Because at high temperatures, root respiration is really high, burning through sugars rapidly, and the plant needs those sugars to detoxify the ammonia that comes from taking up ammonium. If the sugars are gone...
The ammonia becomes toxic.
Exactly. That's why, in greenhouse production, controlling the ammonium concentration, according to variations in root temperature, is vital.
There was a really striking example in the sources, wasn't there, about cooling tomato roots.
Yeah, showing how quickly things respond. Water transport up the stem of a tomato plant drops significantly within just 30 minutes of cooling at the roots.
30 minutes.
And even just 15 minutes of chilling caused visible ultrastructural changes inside cucumber root cells. Tiny damage appearing that quickly.
So it's not just the roots getting generally sluggish, it's specific things shutting down.
Right. The science suggests low temperatures primarily reduce the root's hydraulic conductivity, how easily water passes through, mainly by affecting the activity of those aquaporin water channels, and a key enzyme called H+ ATPase, more than just making cell walls rigid or something.
Okay, temperature is huge. What about calcium? We usually think of it as just another nutrient.
It is a nutrient, but it plays other critical roles too, especially in protecting the root. It helps ameliorate or lessen the harm from acid soils and salty soils.
How does it help with salt?
Calcium ions basically compete with sodium ions for spots on the outside of the root cells, the cell wall exchange complex. By occupying those spots, calcium helps prevent sodium from getting in and causing damage, allowing roots to function better even with increasing sodium around.
So calcium is like a bouncer at the door, keeping too much sodium out.
That's a good way to think about it. It also plays a role in cell elongation itself, partly through interactions with things called oxygen radicals.
Okay, interesting. What about factors from above ground, like light? Does sunshine affect root growth?
Generally, yes. High light intensity on the leaves means more photosynthesis, which means more sugars, carbohydrates, are produced.
And those sugars fuel the roots.
Exactly. A bigger carbohydrate pool sent down usually stimulates more root growth. It's a direct link between the factory upstairs and the engine downstairs.
Makes sense. And what about other life down there? Microbes. Fungi.
Ah, yes, the mycorrhizal alliance. This is a really important symbiotic relationship between roots and certain types of fungi.
Symbiotic meaning both benefit.
Correct. These fungal partners essentially extend the root system dramatically, helping the plant access nutrients, especially phosphorus, that might be too far away or in forms the root can't easily get on its own. This is crucial for plant survival in many natural low-nutrient habitats.
So it's like the roots outsourcing some nutrient gathering.
Kind of. It's a vital partnership. However,
this catch.
Well, in heavily fertilized systems, like conventional container plants where phosphorus is usually abundant, this beneficial association often disappears. The plant doesn't need the fungus as much, so the symbiosis breaks down.
So it's less important in pots, but maybe more so for organic growing.
Potentially, yes, or in lower input systems. And, back to our earlier point, soil compaction also reduces these fungal associations, another way human activity impacts this hidden world.
Okay, so we have temperature, calcium, light, microbes. What about the root's own internal controls? Hormones.
Right, we can't forget the internal orchestra. Roots aren't just passive tubes, they are sophisticated chemical factories in their own right.
Factories. Producing what?
Well, they store carbohydrates. Obviously, things like carrots and potatoes are stored roots we eat. But they also produce a huge range of compounds, many for their own defense against pests or pathogens.
In hormones too, you said.
Crucially, yes. They synthesize key plant hormones right there in the root tips. Things like abscisic acid, or ABA, which is vital for stress responses like drought, and indole acetic acid, IAA, a major auxin involved in root formation and growth.
So the root is making its own signaling molecules.
Absolutely. It's a precise balance of these hormones, along with others like cytokinins, gibberellins, ethylene, that ultimately controls root growth patterns. Any change in the environment, whether it's water levels, temperature, nutrients.
It gets translated into hormone signals.
Exactly. It's translated into an increase or decrease in these internal compounds, and as a result, root elongation rate is affected. It's the root's internal command system, constantly adjusting based on external cues.
Wow. So bringing this all together, it really drives home that roots are so much more than we usually give them credit for. They're truly the hidden half.
Definitely. They're complex, dynamic organs, constantly sensing, responding, adapting, navigating physical roadblocks, chemical challenges, managing water, selectively grabbing nutrients, even manufacturing their own hormones. It's incredible.
They really are the unsung heroes of plant survival and growth.
Understanding all these intricate processes, even just scratching the surface like we've done today, it gives you a whole new perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. You look at any plant differently, from a little herb on your windowsill to, a giant tree or a whole field of crops.
It underscores the amazing resilience, the intelligence, really, of nature, and how these seemingly small details happening way down below ground have massive impacts up above, affecting everything from how much food we can grow to whether endangered species survive.
It's quite the revelation. Which leaves me with a final thought. Given that so much of a plant's essential work happens completely out of sight and is so incredibly sensitive to its surroundings, what other hidden halves might we be overlooking in the natural world all around us? And what might we learn if we just, decided to dig a little deeper?